everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's panel. Today's panel topic is faith-based financing, what your faith organization needs to know. And as usual, before I introduce our panelists and we jump into this topic, I do have some quick logistics to cover. NXUnite, made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, is a new online community resource for the mission-driven industry. The NXUnite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video, on NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and panels with experts such as these lovely folks here with me today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. At any time during the panel, please feel free to submit your questions via the questions tab. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know. My team member Anton is under the Team NXUnite username and will be happy to assist in the chat. Also just wanted to say that this panel is being recorded. It will be accessible both to those of you logging on live now. It'll be right in your email inbox after this session, as well as for those who registered who couldn't attend live, and for those who want to register after if you want to continue to share this video, if you found it really helpful with other members of your community. Okay, before I introduce our panelists, I do want to give a quick thank you to those of you attending live, watching the recording, who registered. I had a really great time looking through all the registrants, seeing everyone, all the different organizations represented. It's really great to be in touch with you, and thank you for taking some of your day and spending it with us. All right, time to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Karen Houghton. Karen is the CEO of Infinite Giving, a relationship and technology-driven nonprofit investment advisor. Karen leverages her deep nonprofit expertise to bring a modern and curated investment experience to nonprofit organizations all over the U.S. She advocates for organizational sustainability through better financial management, strategic access to curated investment practices for reduced management fees, and increased asset giving. Great to have you, Karen.
Hey, Colleen, thanks for having me.
Christian Spiro is the Vice President of Sales at Jitasa. He has been with Jitasa since the summer of 2010 and started off as an entry-level accounting representative, working directly with clients on their day-to-day accounting needs. It was his first real job, and he's never left. Since then, Christian worked his way to General Manager of Bookkeeping and Accounting Services, supervising a team of accountants that deliver services to our 1,000 plus nonprofit clients. Great to have you, Christian.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Andrew Robison is the president of Petrus Development. Prior to Petrus, he spent 13 years in development, working for 2 Catholic campus ministry programs, a university foundation. As president of Petrus, Andrew focuses on recruiting excellent talent, building the client base, and developing strategies that will add value to the current and future partners at Petrus. Andrew loves the Catholic Church, his family, and testing his limits. Great to have you, Andrew.
Thanks, Colleen. Pleasure to be here.
All right, we have a fantastic group of panelists, all who have very different perspectives on this topic that brings us here today, so I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to just jump right in with our questions, and Christian, I'm going to have you start us off. So my first question is, why is it important for faith-based organizations to meaningfully and regularly reflect on their finances and financial practices?
Yeah, well, I think that the reflection of your finances is a pretty easily answered question. You need to know how you're doing financially in order to be able to make decisions on where your organization is going. You'll be unable to really properly plan for growth, either up or down, if you don't have a good grasp of how you're doing financially. So reviewing that, monthly or quarterly at least, is really important to understand how you're doing financially. Now, the reflection on financial practices, while still important, is a bit more situational, and I think can be reviewed a little less frequently. But it's important to make sure that you're staying really on top of accounting regulations and on practices that directly impact your congregation. Like how they're able to give a semi-annual or annual review of the practices that you're following is a good cadence to really ensure that you're up to date on things, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. All right, turning to you, Karen, why should faith-based organizations reflect on their finances and financial practices regularly?
I think it just comes down to being a good steward of what we've been given. It's just a cornerstone into how nonprofits, especially usually faith-based nonprofits, I mean, everyone should be thinking this way, But I think there's just an extra layer of morality and integrity around, hey, you need to do what you say you're going to do, and you need to have good stewardship over the treasures and resources that you've been given. And I think nonprofits spend, rightfully so, such a huge amount of their time raising the money, and it's this endless cycle of fundraising over and over again. Yet there's not enough time spent talking about, hey, we're raising it. You can't just raise money, you have to manage it. So how are we managing that money? What are our policies around that? What are the best practices that we should be doing? And how is that tied into our mission to make sure we're being good stewards of what we're given? So I think it's just a big balance of talking about managing it instead of just raising it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Andrew, why is it important for organizations to reflect on the intersection between fundraising and financial management?
I think that I would agree with Karen in that stewardship piece. The other thing to think about is we say all the time at Petrus that fundraising is a ministry, development is a ministry. And in that way, as a fundraiser, as a frontline fundraiser, I engage in conversations, in deep, meaningful conversations with donors in ways that they are, and a lot of times I am sort of providing an education to them on how they can use their resources, both to fulfill their own life, their own calling, and then to make an impact in the world. And so I think that, from the nonprofit side, if we're not practicing what we preach, so to speak, then it really puts us in a difficult position to have those meaningful conversations with donors and to have them trust that what we're asking them to do is what we are also doing through our organizations. Absolutely.
Great. All right. We're off to a fantastic start. Karen, I'm going to have you start us off with this next question. What small changes could faith-based organizations do to kind of make a big difference when it comes to finances? Like little changes that can make a big difference.
So I'm going to come in at that question from the investment side of things, because what I see way too often is nonprofits who are getting out of that scarcity mindset, which is great, right? We all start there, and that's okay. But as you're creating financial sustainability and you're starting to get a nice reserve fund. I always say that's the first milestone and kind of cornerstone of financial sustainability for a nonprofit, is getting a healthy reserve. Then often what happens is that reserve fund is sitting in a savings account or a money market. And that is very short-sighted. So I know that's a strong statement for some of you, but here's something to think about, is that what emotionally feels safe is not often backed by real-time data and how people follow their finances. So just like as individuals, we're not saving for retirement in a savings account or cash under our mattress. Some of you might be, but generally speaking, the best practices would be, hey, we have a 403B, we have a 401k. And the reason we're doing that is because we're putting it into the market to invest. And it's really important because it does two things. A, over a long period of time, it's going to grow. And then you have compound interest. So if you have $10 million, some of us watching this may be like, that is a dream. Some of us may be like, oh, we reached that a long time ago, right? There's a lot of variables in the nonprofit world. But $10 million sitting in a savings account, in 10 years, you may have gained $40,000 or $50,000. $10 million in the market, if you're going to get the average annual returns of 8%, right? This is illustrative only, but if you're going to get the average 8%, that $10 million in 10 years is $21 million. So when you think about, oh, I'm called to be a good steward, right? We can think about the parable of the talents. Like if you're from the Christian faith, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but it's like, all right, what are we called to be good stewards? If it is a reserve fund, a savings account, 0.06% interest rate each year. Money market, 0.11 average interest rate per year. Okay. Inflation right now, 8%, 9%. Is that forever? No. But even in the best economy, the Fed's target inflation rate is 2%. So I know I'm throwing around a lot of numbers, but if you're just looking at, hey, I'm going to do what feels safe, so I'm going to put it in a savings account. We're not going to touch it for a lot of years. It's reserve funds. We want it accessible, but ideally we're not dependent on it over the next, few years. When time comes, will it still be there? Yes. But will it have the same buying power? Absolutely not. So you're losing value. So there's risk in doing what you think feels safe. So often what we're doing is coming in with education and looking at, hey, if you're going to spend this in 12 months, great. Put it in a high yield savings account, put it in a money market, maybe some T-bills, short-term T-bills. So there's options. But when it's a true reserve fund and you're putting it away, the simplest starting point that I tell people to do is put those funds into a diversified portfolio in the market. It can still be very, very conservative, but then you're going to maybe get those average annual returns of 3%, 5%, 8%. And that becomes really meaningful money over time, not only for capital preservation, so that say you have a building and you're putting it away because that's for your HVAC and you know you're going to need a new HVAC in 7 years. I talk to people all the time who are like, well, we did that, but 7 years later, we can't afford that anymore. And we have to do a whole other fundraising campaign to make up the difference. Stewardship means you should put that money into an investment portfolio. And so I think just too many financial decisions are driven by emotions or fear, especially by boards who are worried about perception and different things. But I always say financial decisions should not be based on emotion, but you need to look at data, long-term goals, risk tolerance, and then you need to make really strategic decisions. And often the very first way to do that is to be strategic about where and how you're putting your money. And banks are not for storing long-term money. The market is. That's what foundations do. That's what community funds do. That's what we all do with our personal 403Bs or 401Ks.
Great, thank you. All right, Andrew, I'm going to have you jump in. What innovations can faith-based organizations make to their fundraising practices that will have a big impact?
So I'll approach it from a little bit of a different perspective, and I'll talk about staffing, right? So there's an example of the Archdiocese of New York, and they have a robust fundraising team that manages the Cardinals Appeal every year, which typically generates $18 to $20 million in giving. And as the team they had really skilled fundraisers, but as a team turned over a couple of years ago, they really invested time in hiring men and women of strong faith to be part of that team, and then provided the training and the resources to get them to bring their skill level up to be able to fundraise appropriately. And then when COVID happened, they ended up, not being able to go out and visit people, not being able to visit parishes even, and priests, and certainly the donors. And so they put a practice in place where they called, I want to say it was over 13,000 or 15,000 individual families. And those conversations were not just about fundraising. They were filled with people's fears, people's anxiety, so many of those conversations turned to, can I pray with you? Or can I put you in touch with the priest to talk about this? And so can a skilled fundraiser who does not have a strong faith have those conversations? Absolutely. But are they going to be as meaningful for the donor as they would be if the individual fundraisers are approaching it with that foundation? The answer is pretty clear. So I would say I love everything that Karen said on the management side. You have to be good stewards. From a staffing side, you also have to be good stewards, and you have to put together the right team that's going to, again, going back to that, fundraising is a ministry that is going to be able to engage and interact with your donors in a true ministerial way.
All right, Andrew, can I ask you a question? Because in these things with the talents, I totally agree with all of this. I bet there are people listening who are like, I know someone on my team right now is not that person. Yeah. Like, how do you those are such difficult conversations. Like, how do you have that conversation with, like, okay, if we need to make some new hires or shift, like, can they be, it's faith, so it's not really something you're going to be able to train, right? So you're talking about actually getting folks out of the wrong seat on the bus, right? And getting the right people in. Any advice on how to do that?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I think that it's about culture, right? So going back to the Archdiocese of New York, when they were hiring these individuals, kind of doing these hires, and we have clients all the time, you're right. You're not able to ask questions, and you shouldn't be asking questions about how strong is your faith. But can you create a culture and environment where the team is praying together and where the team is attending mass or attending service together? Yes, absolutely. And so I think that if that's the culture that you create, that the individuals who to your point, who aren't in that place right now. Could it be a ministry to them? Absolutely. Or could it be an opportunity for them to say, I love the fundraising side of it, but I would feel more comfortable in an environment that doesn't have this strong faith culture, right? So you're not necessarily pushing people out, but you're offering them an opportunity to either come along with you and grow in that way, or find a new opportunity, right? And that's a tough time sometimes. And I know with the Archdiocese and with other places, losing a staff member is never easy. But when you can have that culture that this is who we're looking for on our team next, then it creates long-term benefit for the organization, the institution, that I think you're not going to get without that strong culture.
Yeah, that culture piece is so important. And I'm sure, Christian, I know y'all have a really strong culture there. At Infinite Giving, one of the ways we kind of go around that, right? I'm a person of faith. I have a former executive pastor as our director of business development who works with a lot of churches. But we always say, like, we're a registered investment advisor for nonprofits, but we're very clear with our values, right? Ours, and they're two things: be kind and do excellent work. And it's on our website. And when we're hiring, we talk about that. And it's kind of that indirect, like, hey, if you think being kind is like not a priority or not important to you, the fact that we're saying it right there up front over and over again, it kind of allows people to opt out. But I think having the right people on the team is so important.
I mean, just as an example from our staff, our team is very small, right? And we're not a nonprofit. We're a for-profit business that works with nonprofits. But there have been some individuals over the last, I've been running the company for 5 years, over the last 5 years, that I thought had amazing skill sets, but we had to ultimately go in a different direction with a hire because they weren't on board with the culture that we were creating. And was that really tough to lose that individual and lose their skills? Absolutely. But I think looking back, now where we are 5 years, if we had made those decisions to bring some of those people on at the time, it would have dramatically changed the culture and how we can run and create that team. And I'm glad that we ultimately, looking back where we are now, I'm glad we made some of those decisions.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for asking that question, Karen. All right, Christian, I'm going to have you jump in here next. There are so many pieces to finances for faith-based organizations. What changes and updates can organizations make to improve their current practices?
Yeah, so I think that, you hit the nail on the head here. There's a lot of different areas that you could focus on and a lot of different directions that you could take, this question, or the answer to this question. I'm going to focus on things that I think can actually combine the two answers that Karen and Andrew actually gave, which is being a good steward by allowing your team to focus on what they do best. And that's one of the things that we try to bring as an organization, is that ability to focus on what you do best as an organization. So outside of internal controls and improving and making sure that you have great internal controls in place, I think that a very easy thing or a very small thing to change that provides a big impact is really in terms of technology. And I think that we've got a question that we're going to talk about here in a minute on technology, but there's a lot of little things that you can do that have a very big impact in terms of giving, in terms of accounting efficiency, in terms of accuracy with your financials, that really all points back to being a good steward. But it also gives your team the ability to spend less time on the mundane accounting practices that allows them to focus on what they do best. Because you may have a great accountant that you work with, which is fantastic. You need that, but let's be real honest. Them posting a journal entry is not the best use of their skills, right? So doing things like the implementation of system syncs, QuickBooks Online as an example allows you to connect your bank to the software for transactional information exchange, so that automatically comes through. So not making your accountant go through and post every deposit or every EFT that came through, that's greatly going to reduce the amount of time that they're spending on some of this mundane work for that, that's a no cost implementation if you have QuickBooks Online as your system already. So it can save you time, it can save you effort in the month close process. This allows for a faster close, more accurate information, and again, more time for your team to focus on what they're doing best and make the decisions that is going to drive your organization forward.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we are turning to technology next, so this was the perfect segue into that. Thank you. So Andrew, I'm going to have you start us off with this next one. What advice do you have for faith-based organizations who want to incorporate more technology into their fundraising practices? And what can faith-based organizations do with technology? What are the limits?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I think the thing to think about before technology is that technology, introducing a new technology is never going to solve a big problem, right? You need to have people, you need to have processes, and then the technology in those instances can be utilized to be effective. So that's just like the starting point, right? I know I've worked with clients that say, we're struggling with the fundraising, but if we had this technology, we'd be good. And if they don't have the people and the processes, then it's just money spent on technology that isn't going to solve that need. So I think that's just sort of the starting point. I would say some of the most basic technologies that a lot of nonprofits they don't have and they suffer as a result is a good database. Right. So I've worked with nonprofits that keep all their records in an Excel, or, they're forced to use a database that's designed for one purpose, but they have to use it, or they feel like they have to. So they kind of try to make it fit for as a true fundraising database. And so I would say really spend the time to invest in a good database. And it doesn't have to be a tremendous investment. Right. There's database programs that we recommend to clients all the time that are anywhere from $50 a month to $200 a month to $400 a month and up, but it doesn't have to be a tremendous investment. Now, the more that you're able and willing to spend on that technology, the more robust and the more possibilities it's going to open for you. But don't feel like you want to skimp on a good database, because that I think it was Christian that said, or maybe it was Karen that said, you have to have good data. And so if you're not tracking your own internal data, your donor data, being able to run reports, find out your trends in your donors, then you're really putting yourself in a tough position. So there's a million other technologies, and I'm sure Karen and Christian will talk to some of those. But I would say that's a core technology that I see a lot of nonprofits really don't understand the value of it and don't invest in it, and then end up with problems down the road as a result.
Absolutely. I feel like every fundraising related panel I'm on, that comes up. It's like, have your data, have your systems, have it. Your Excel spreadsheet is great, but you can do so much more if you just do the investment into a software. So
I always tell people, it's like evaluate the time. Like, it's like, how much time is it taking you to create this Excel sheet? Is it scalable? Ideally, you're growing. It's not going to be just you forever. And as you add a team, and it's like, hey, evaluate. Yeah, it may cost X amount up here, but how much time will that save you? And then what can you do with that time? Are you going to fundraise more money? Can you make something else more efficient? So it's money in or out, but it's also time saved, which is also money that you can use.
And think long term, right? Like your investment now is think about what you want your nonprofit to be able to do and accomplish 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Use the example of $10 million, 10 years from now, what's that going to be? Think of it as your development program as well. And so making foundational decisions now are going to set you up for long-term success and set the team up for long-term success, which is important, right? That's what we are trying to do, is to build sustainable, long-standing, impactful nonprofits and causes that stand the test of time. And having that good data and those investments now will put you in the position to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, Christian, I'm going to have you come in here. Where does technology fit in with your work and the organizations you're working with, and where can it benefit faith-based organizations?
Yeah, so for us at Jitasa, technology is front and center. So we work remotely with all of our clients. We have actually very few clients that are here in Boise, where I'm calling in from, that we have any sort of direct contact with on a personal level or a one-to-one level. So technology for us is really front and center. We really push our clients to adopt practices. Getting to Andrew's comment there, that technology is nothing if you don't have a good practice behind it, right? But we push our clients to adopt practices that are tech driven. And a great example that I've got for this, excuse me, is Bill.com. So Bill.com is a payment platform that allows for the submission, entry, review, approval, and payment of bills all electronically. So you can do it from your phone, you can do it from your computer, you can do it from a tablet. It's an incredible software that has really, especially in today's COVID world, it has changed how we as a company do AP. So I've seen clients back when we did conferences, but I've seen clients that have approved bills while we're walking to get a coffee at a conference. And so it's like, there's no more tracking down somebody to sign a check because it's all done online. And so, for us, that has really driven, again, that efficiency, that effectiveness of the accounting, function because of a technology piece that we've put in place. Now, I think that, faith-based organizations can benefit from technology in many of the same ways that other nonprofits or even some for-profit organizations can as well. Things like allowing members to give via text message. If you're not doing this at your organization, I'd highly encourage it, because it's just having that opportunity or that option for people to give in a way that they feel comfortable, right? It's a small change from a technology standpoint that could have a huge impact on your giving. Having the option to auto pay each week or each month, so that people can set up those recurring payments. Again, a small thing that can have a big impact. Connecting different online platforms to your accounting software. So all of these things really can improve the accuracy, the timeliness, and at the end, the security of your accounting information as you drive the organization forward, right? Because there's different levels of that technology can shelter you from as an organization in terms of security. So like I said, for us, technology is front and center. We really try and push a lot of our clients to do things more technologically advanced, more technologically efficient. And I think that it pays off in the end.
Great. All right, Karen, what do you see as the power of technology when it comes to faith-based financing?
I love what the guys are saying. And Andrew, I agree. Like, people, you still need people. Technology is not taking over for people. We don't need to be scared of it, but it should be your best friend, right? So technology, we're a technology company as well, and you should be leveraging that to create efficiencies, to make your life easier, not harder. So if you're trying to use a new technology and it's just too complicated, all of that, make sure that you're choosing something that's making your life easier and more simplistic. And I love what Christian said earlier too, just even about QuickBooks, like paying somebody even upfront to make sure that all the automations that are happening in your QuickBooks, like getting it set up right from the beginning, will save you so much time and effort just in basic bookkeeping. I'm a big fan of that. We do that. We use Bill Pay as well, Bill.com. So all that to say is, for technology, one of the things that we do as an investment advisor for nonprofits is we created an automated investment platform. We're the first one in the world that allows for entity investing. And so if you think about, Schwab Intelligence portfolios, you think about Wealthfront, Betterment, there's lots of automated investment platforms out there. Don't let that scare you. There's still people in there. There's still investment committees. There's still curating portfolios and actively reviewing. But the beauty of technology in the investment world, and why it's been so popular with retail customers like you and I can invest, but it was never available for nonprofits. So what we've allowed technology to do was to drastically reduce the overhead that nonprofits were paying third-party investment managers. So often we talk to folks, and right, and big banks are not bad people, right? But big banks have a lot of overhead. There's a lot of people. Investing is a very, very traditional industry. That means it was very ripe for disruption, and in a way that you can leverage technology. So we've brought fees down to a third of what people are paying investment management typically. We also are able to automate quarterly board reports. we add a layer of transparency and accountability, which I think is really important. Too often I talk to nonprofits and they're like, well, yeah, we got the guy and he comes in once a year, maybe once a quarter with all the things that no one reads. And they tell us what we need to know because we don't know it. And I'm like, great, but like there shouldn't be secrecy behind the curtain. So for us, like you can log in, you can set different views, different permissions. So your CPA can get in there, your executive director can, your finance committee can. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, but you're able to set permissions and access, right? And so it's like, great, they all need statements. They want quarterly board reports. And then also like we've been able to automate cryptocurrency, stock gifts, and endowment creation. So even something as difficult as opening a brokerage account for a nonprofit. Usually that would take weeks, right? And there's PDFs and there's wet ink. We're able to help a nonprofit open a brokerage account with 20 minutes of their time. Fully digital. It's like 100x better experience. And then once they're an investment client, we've automated gifting pages that allow them to do stock gifts, completely automated, complete transparency. No more question of like, we got a tranche of a stock gift, $50K. Does anybody know who or where it came from or why? It wasn't dependent on the donor. So we bring transparency to that where you see everybody's name, their email, what they gave, the date they gave it with crypto stocks. And then even the idea of endowments. Like we are endowment experts. We have helped several organizations create their first endowment as well as manage their endowments currently. And we're able to reduce the fees, increase transparency, and even give like a donor portal view for named endowments. So now people can log in and they can see their family endowment and they can invite their kids and grandkids to it. So there's lots of really unique ways that like for Infinite Giving as a technology company that we're able to provide these really unique aspects that can serve a nonprofit well. Again, it's about efficiency, it's about effectiveness. And for us, it's about helping you grow your giving too. So again, technology done in the right way with the right people should make your life better and ideally move your mission forward.
Karen, you're speaking to all of the challenges that we see from an accounting perspective, right? With people getting gifts and not knowing where that stock gift came from, and it's like it's $50,000. How do you not know where this came from? And it's just, well, we don't have the knowledge or transparency to see into that. So, speaking directly to challenges that we see, daily with our clients, and having a technology solution to it. That's fantastic.
It's a very broken system and it's a very traditional system. And part of that is because it was not made for nonprofits. So when you take any third-party vendor, like any of us who are serving nonprofits, it's like, hey, if it's industry specific, we understand the pain points and we're able to leverage technology in a way that solves those pain points for you. But it doesn't like, as you know, Christian, I'm like, I talk to like massive development teams. There's like 12-person teams of higher education. And they're like, we have this pain point. And then I talk to like a 2-person team and they're like, we have this pain point. Or I talk to smaller nonprofits and they're like, Karen, I can't get anyone to even open a brokerage account because we don't meet the high minimums of big banks. And if we do, the fees are like 2.5 to even, I did an RFP for somebody and they were paying close to 3% once they layered in all their independent fees that the banks had. And I was like, great, ours is 0.65%, 65 basis points. Like we're like a quarter of what that would be. It's quicker. And they're like, it's like sometimes when things are new, people are scared of it. And they're like, well, what does this mean? And I'm like, it means we're here to serve you and make your life better. Like that's like, there's not always, I think, especially in faith-based, is like find your people, find the people who understand what you're doing and can come alongside you in service. And that's what we're really passionate about is understanding nonprofits and like, how can we serve them well and do that with integrity.
Fantastic. All right, my next set of questions has to do with a little bit that recognizing that people joining live, watching the recording, we probably have all sorts of different organizations represented of different sizes, denominations, very new, very established. And so it can be hard to figure out what the best practices are for you and your organization and your faith community. So I'd love to have everyone speak to this, but I'll have Christian, you start us off. how can faith-based organizations make sure they're following accounting best practices for their specific organization?
Yeah, well, I would say that, quite frankly, attending discussions like this is a great start. In my opinion, one of the biggest hurdles that you have to overcome at the beginning is just knowing what's out there and how it works. And I mean, you have a problem or you see something that's inefficient within your organization, just knowing what solutions are available is half the battle, right? So get exposure to what's available, get exposure to how it works. Ask a lot of questions. To me, that's kind of step one, if you will. Step two, I think, is really thinking through how you can apply those different options to your organizations. Not everything is going to be a great fit. Not everything is going to be a fit right now. But just understanding, okay, we've got this piece that we want to improve on, and here are the options that we have for that. And how can we plug those in, right? So understanding what your current congregation needs, understanding what your current congregation values, and then also applying that to where the organization is going in the future. How are you going to drive that? I think that's kind of step two. And step three, I would say, is just picking the solution and implementing it. There may be three different options that you have, and the change or the changes between them may be fairly minor. Pick one and go with it. So I would say that's probably the second biggest hurdle that you'll have, just because people are averse to change, and people see technology, as Karen put it, as a scary thing, where it can be a huge tool that you use to improve the function and the experience that you're seeing. So pick one, stick with it, reiterate the benefits of what you're going to be implementing, give people guidance, and help them realize that it's not just about them, it's what's best for the organization. And it kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of being good stewards to the funds that they've given to the organization. So if you can kind of look at those different pieces and apply that to what you're currently seeing and the current inefficiency or the current problem that you're seeing, I think that people will come around.
Great. Okay, Karen, what do leaders of faith-based organizations need to consider when deciding what financial practices their organization should focus on?
One of the things that I think is really important is having clarity of the board role versus like the executive director or the CEO or the pastor or whoever that role is. Because boards always have the fiduciary responsibility, right? But then often that can go the wrong way, where it ends up making organizations very inefficient and sometimes even unhealthy. And I would love to hear what Andrew and Christian think about this too. But like, we run into that a lot, where it's like, hey, like really good intentions can go awry when you have, unclear roles for boards, especially in this fiduciary responsibility, right? So it's like, hey, who can make these decisions? And like, if you have a whole finance department and they don't have the freedom to make decisions without double checking with the board, or we had somebody and they were like, hey, I need approval to spend $100. And it was like the executive director. And I was like, oh, this is a bigger conversation. Like, what? So there's all these things where, again, it's all good intentions, but nonprofits have a really unique structure to where it's like, who does what? And you have to clarify the roles. And ideally, that board is not making decisions, right? They should not be making those everyday decisions. Instead, what they want to do is they want to empower the team to move forward without them, but they're the ones who should be making really healthy policies and providing the guardrails and kind of just oversight to what these policies are. And it's a big differentiation that I think sometimes nonprofits get a little mixed up, and then it gets really inefficient and becomes a problem. So even like on the investment side of things, occasionally we talk to nonprofits whose board members are managing their own money, and that you should not be doing that, right? And so there's this element of, well, but I've got a guy on my board and he's going to do it for free, or he'll do it, which on the outset, it sounds very reasonable. You're like, oh, well, that's nice that all worked out. But there are so many ways that it goes wrong. So anecdotally, like things that happen all the time, I have these conversations. It's like, hey, someone was on the board, they were managing it, but now they're rolling off the board. hey, someone was on the board and they were managing it, but they underperformed for the last 4 years and we don't know how to have this conversation. Or the other day I was like, hey, the board chair was managing their money because he owned a firm. And I was like, hey, you know what? Just be careful. There's a conflict of interest, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yeah, but technically if we disclose it, it's not a big deal. And I was like, true. But ethically, and especially for faith-based organizations, I'm like, there's several layers to this where you want to think about what that is. And I was like, I understand if it's free, but, and they're like, what do you mean free? Long story short, their board chair was still charging them 1.5% to manage those funds. And I was like, all right, the one thing you should take away from this conversation is your board. It should not be your board chair, but they should also, if they are doing it, they should not be charging you this. So there's lots of layers to this. Or what if you have 2 investment advisors on your board? How do you choose which one? It just becomes a very political game. So what I always say is I remind people like, hey, clarify the rules. And a good investment policy statement can do this. An investment policy statement or an IPS is like that governing document that every board should have when you start to look at investing or an endowment, even if it's like $100,000 endowment. Got to start somewhere, right? So have an IPS. If you need one, infinitegiving.com, go to resources. We literally have a free template that you can download and then just edit to kind of meet, but it's gone through our compliance and attorneys. So it gives people a starting place. But the board's job is to choose who that investment advisor is. It's to review that investment advisor's performance. Hey, are they following the IPS? And the IPS has stuff like, hey, we're not going to do junk bonds, or here's the allocations that we're comfortable with, or a disbursement for an endowment should be between 3 and 6%, but it gives them leniency to change as you go. So not a perfect document, but the conflict of board management in this and just the ability to clarify roles and make sure that the team is being empowered and not micromanaged, but that the board, good intentions, volunteers, there should be board terms so that they're rolling off, right? That's healthy. And then also just having them understand we have a fiduciary responsibility, but what does that mean? And how do we fill that role in a healthy way that helps move the mission forward rather than tangling it up in politics or inefficiencies? Right, Andrew and Christian, like we all weigh in. Do y'all experience these things?
Yeah, I was on a call one time doing financial review with the executive director and the treasurer. And I just remember we were going through their statement of activities, and this treasurer was hounding him on every expense for the month. I'm like, dude, it's $45. Let it go. If you can't trust your executive director to spend $45 wisely, he shouldn't be the executive director. Period. End of story. So I think that you hit it on the head. You know, your board's role is to guide, to oversee. It is not to micromanage. You know, so often we get clients that will say, well, I've got to run this, $1,000 decision past our board. And I'm going, no, you don't. You're the executive director. You can make that decision. Like, this is not something that you need to have board approval for. And I think that does come back to, Andrew, I think that you were bringing it up earlier, the culture of the organization. And is there a culture of trust? Is there a culture of, understanding? Or is it this culture of, for lack of a better term, fear and, in neglect, if you will, where they're not empowering their people that they put into position. Instead, they're trying to micromanage because they don't trust them.
Yeah. There is no place for ego in nonprofit world and on a board. You can't have ego and serve an organization well.
Andrew, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, but also I was going to ask kind of from your perspective of the fundraising side, how can leaders make sure they're keeping up their specific organization?
Yeah, I think the two are tied together in my answer, right? So it's, I'm going to go back to people. It's about having the right people. And, if we have nonprofit leaders, executive directors, chaplains on the call, I think that it starts with you in creating that culture. And so that culture, I've seen nonprofit leaders go one of two ways, right? Number one, they hire people and then they say, I don't know how to do what you do, so you just do it and I'm going to hope and pray that everything works out, right? Or there's the other side where you have a nonprofit leader that says, and sometimes it starts, with a startup nonprofit where they're having to do everything. But then as the organization grows and as you have people on the team and going back to board, as you have a strong board, or quality board members, they don't want to let go. And so they want to be involved in everything. And a nonprofit leader has to find that middle ground, right? You can't just trust everybody to perform and disengage completely, right? There needs to be oversight. There needs to be accountability on your team. You need to have some awareness, but to try to micromanage and make every decision for your staff is just a recipe for burnout. So I would say, kind of on the how can leaders make sure it's about, it starts with hiring, right? Bringing the right people on that fit your culture, that fit your mission, that believe in what you're doing. And then it's about providing training and coaching and mentoring. So, sometimes that means that, a nonprofit leader needs to be willing to let their staff, fundraising staff in particular, that's where my sort of world is, find mentors, find people, develop relationships within the community. And sometimes that takes time, but, I tell people all the time, if you work at let's say you work at a campus ministry, right? Then go find your peers at other campus ministries that you can develop relationships with and have that camaraderie that sometimes fundraising is a lonely job. So you need community. But then also find people that you can ask questions to that come up when you don't know how to do something. I went to my first conference when I was 6 months on the job as a 22-year-old. And some of those people I still have great relationships with, and I still connect with on a professional and a personal level. So it's about having community that fundraising staff can rely on for expertise, for guidance, but then also just for community to allow them to feel fulfilled in the work. So sometimes that's continuing education, that's conferences, that's being part of webinars like this. When I have a nonprofit a fundraiser that says, I'd love to go to a conference, or I'd love to be on this webinar, but we have no money in the budget for professional development, or I feel like I'm cheating whenever I have to take a personal day or a personal hour to attend a webinar. And that's a problem, right? That starts with culture, but that is up to the nonprofit leaders to invest in their staff. And sometimes that's bringing in a coach or a consultant to help with a specific need or a specific project. And it's about somebody that knows has the expertise and can help guide them, and then also can help that individual grow. Right? If we go back to the earlier point that I was making, hire for passion and train for skill, right? Then you have to do the second part. You can't just hire for passion and have people on your team that love the organization, love the cause, and then hope and pray that they're going to perform. Like, you have to then train for skill, and sometimes that's conferences, webinars, coaches, consultants, mentors. And I think that as a nonprofit leader, again, looking at that long term, the investment now will pay off in spades down the road.
Great. All right. Unbelievably, we are in our last 10 minutes. The hour always flies by. So I have two kind of quick speed round questions, and then we will wrap up. So my first one has to do with the future. We've talked a little bit about thinking ahead, thinking of the future. So Andrew, if you could start us off on this one, how can faith leaders best prepare themselves for the future of fundraising?
So I didn't talk about it all, but monthly giving is a huge area of growth for a lot of nonprofits that they're not exploring with intentionality. I work with organizations that 50% of their budget is funded through automatic recurring transactions that happen every month from donors that love and support their organization. But that's because they spent time building that up. So monthly giving, I would say, is something that can benefit your organization now, but if you look to the future long term, it can have transformational impact long term. So that's my answer.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, Christian, what should leaders be considering as they look towards their organization's future?
Yeah, so in terms of accounting, which is the world that I live in, I don't think I can overstate the tech piece of things. It's obviously it's got to be supported by a great culture and great people and great policies. But the tech piece is as we continue to develop things, systems continue to integrate and to change. I don't think I can overstate that. Whether that is congregationally facing, where you're talking about, the monthly giving piece that Andrew was just mentioning, or a text to give type of a situation, or if it's internally facing with your accounting team and the system integrations that I was talking about earlier. There's so many options to improve the accuracy, efficiency, and security of your accounting. If you're not looking at that as you continue to move forward into the future of your organization, I really do think that you're doing yourself and your donors a disservice by not considering that different tech piece.
Definitely. Okay, Karen, looking towards the future, what do they need to consider?
I love everything just mentioned. I would probably put an emphasis on asset giving in addition to cash giving. There are so many nonprofits that when you click donate and you go on their website and you donate, it's only a cash option. And if there is something that it's a very manual, like we'll call the office and we'll talk to you about other ways. And I know everyone likes to relationship build and they're like, oh, but if they click something, it's too easy and I won't get my hands on them. And I'm like, but how does the donor want to give, right? And what do they want to give? So stock gifts, the average stock gift is $8,000. The average cryptocurrency gift is $10,000. Right there, you're looking at, all right, if you can facilitate really easy ways for them to be able to give you, and it benefits them, right? It benefits the donor. It is the most tax efficient way to give. They don't have to pay long-term capital gains. They get higher tax savings for their gift. Even in a year like this, we'll see where the market's going, but they can also, and Christian knows this too, like they can have losses, right? So you can claim your losses and you get the tax deduction for the gift. So there's a lot of really interesting ways that we can look at how do we help our donors be educated about other asset giving opportunities? How do we make it really easy and accessible for them? And usually that's a lot of education for the development teams, learning how to do that. And then I'm also like, don't just go and like, look at the different ways to do it. Clearly I'm biased. Infinite giving is the most affordable way to do it. But like, look at the third-party fees and then look at the donor experience and like, how can you enter into those conversations? Because if a donor wants to give that way, you should never say no, right? And endowments are a piece of that too. Endowments used to be only a true endowment, higher education only, right? Like it has to be $1 billion to be really meaningful. It's a very old way of thinking, right? These days, the ideas of micro endowments, quasi endowments. I know we did a whole endowment panel, but there's new conversations around these, and endowments can be, it's not for everybody, right? You have to get out of the scarcity mindset. You have to develop a good reserve fund, and then you have to start thinking in like 5-10 year goals rather than like next month, next quarter. But once you get there, you're able to look at, oh, what would an endowment do? The financial sustainability that it can provide literally for decades and generations to come can be really meaningful. And a quasi endowment also gives you the option to tap into that money down the road if you need to. So it's not just this only restricted kind of game anymore. It's like, hey, we can open up this avenue for giving. It can create sustainability. It's money we don't have to fundraise every year. Maybe you're endowing a position or a program or a scholarship. It's still money that you're not raising every year. And for the donors, it's a legacy of giving. So it's something that they're able to wrap their brains around. It should be the easiest story you can tell, is the gift that you give once that supports your favorite organization for years to come, over and over and over again. So it's a really beautiful gift. So I think the conversations around asset giving, stocks, cryptocurrency, even in endowment gifts are changing. And if you're not positioning yourselves to engage in these with your donors, you're missing out on some potentially really large gifts.
Great. Okay, I have my one little micro speed round question left, and that's we have a ton of panels coming up in the future. There's so many different topics to consider when it comes to nonprofits and faith-based organizations. So I'd love to hear very quickly from each of our panelists, what's a conversation topic idea that you're hoping our faith-based professionals will be thinking about in the coming months?
Totally take,
so
can I go? I'm going to take Christians because Christians mentioned it twice, or I'm just going to say +1 to Christians. Like when we're talking about technology and nonprofits, like this whole conversation around like, should we be scared of it? What does it mean? How many monthly subscriptions should a nonprofit be paying? Like CRMs, accounting, like there's so much technology in the space, but I don't think there's enough people who understand it. And so like, as Christian kept mentioning it, because clearly I'm like-minded as well, I was like, yes, this could be a whole other topic.
Fantastic. All right, Christian, what topic are you hoping we'll talk about in the coming weeks?
Yeah, so tech is kind of the go-to here, right? But for me, I think that really it's also, as we're thinking about the leaders of the organizations, it's just the reflection of where they are internally, right? Where is our organization at? Are there changes that need to be made? If so, great. Like get out there and see what your options are. Google's a great tool, either for an option or to find the expert in the field, which I would highly encourage because they are going to have a wealth of knowledge that you can tap into that you don't have to go out and find on your own. If you don't think that you have changes that need to be made right now, that's also great. I would encourage you to come back to that in 6 months or 3 months or next month and see if that option changes. But again, as Karen was saying, I think that technology and the different uses or the different implementations of technology and how that affects you as a faith-based organization, I think is a great topic.
Awesome. All right, Andrew, what topic are you looking forward to having on everyone's kind of front of mind?
So I think that technology is a perfect one. I would go back to the people. How can nonprofits best train and support their staff members, particularly in the area of fundraising, because it is something that we can always grow in. But certainly, turnover is a real problem. And oftentimes that happens just because people feel overwhelmed and unsupported, and they don't have a community and a team, and they don't have the training. So I would say training and supporting your staff is a big one.
Great. With that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists. I learned a ton. I had a really great time hearing from you. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with me. Also, thank you for, again, everyone who watched live and also everyone watching the recording. Really glad to spend the hour with you. I hope you enjoyed yourself, learned something, and have new ideas of how you can bring innovation to your organization. Quickly wanted to give a little shout out for the number of panels we have coming up in the future. We have a number of faith-based specific panels as well as nonprofit panels generally. Please keep an eye out on the NXUnite website, NXUnite LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I will keep you updated for all the different panels coming up. And as Karen mentioned, we also have panels in the past, so you can go watch recordings of past panels. We have an endowment panel that Karen speaks on, so please keep an eye out there. You can also register for NXUnite so that you can earn rewards for attending panels, which is always fun. I also want to quickly say you will be receiving a survey in your email after this session, all of those attended, and even if you're watching the recording, please let us know how this panel experience was for you, as well as if you have any lingering questions, any topics that you think we need to address in future panels, let us know. We want to make sure we're hosting the panels that are most interesting to you all. And with that, we're done. We're at 1 o'clock. So thank you everyone so much, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks, Colleen. Great serving with you, Karen and Christian.
Thank you.
You too. Likewise. Take care.
Bye. God bless.
Right.